Hello there. My name is Bob Reeker. I'm one of the online teachers K-12 administrators. I currently teach elementary art education in Lincoln Public Schools, and then I'm also an adjunct instructor at Nebraska Wesleyan University, where I teach the art methods course. This last spring was unprecedented when we were suddenly thrust into the idea that we had to provide instruction remotely to students. I think for some districts and schools, it worked very, very smoothly and well. And then for others, it was really, really difficult. So much of it depended on the engagement of the adults in the home in supporting that kind of learning. So what I'd like to explore for the next few minutes with you is this idea of how, if we have to return to remote learning in the fall or some kind of a hybrid of this, how do we best support that creative thinking in the home? What I'm going to share with you is actually a collection of things that I've found both through this group that we are all part of, as well as different art educators from all over the country. I'm very fortunate to work closely with the Nebraska Art Teachers Association, as well as many of my colleagues that are part of the National Art Education Association. So please sit back and enjoy as we kind of take a look at what it is that we can do to help promote and facilitate at-home learning and support those people that are living in the home that can best support our young learners. This presentation is going to cover 6 different areas that I've compiled through all of my study about how we can best support creativity at home. The first area is encouraging adults at home to be facilitators and not the managers of the learning. It's really important that we somehow share with the adults who are encouraging this kind of learning to know that all this exploration that children do is really part of developmental levels. For those of you that have studied art education, you know a big name in the developmental levels of children is Victor Lowenfeld. And if you're not familiar, or maybe you've forgotten some of his work, there's a link right here on this slide that you can take a look at to kind of review what that is. But I think it's important for all adults, whether it's we as the educators or adults that are home, to realize that through play and creative expression, children are constantly discovering things about their world. Some of the best learning happens when children are playing. And that can be children when they are toddlers up until they are into upper elementary, middle school, even high school. So learning happens all the time, and it happens when children are playing. And unfortunately, I think the word play has become a dirty word in education when it shouldn't be. Play should be something that we should be encouraging, because play is all about exploring, investigating, discovering things, and that can all happen through that very powerful tool. So we want to support this exploration and encourage all adults to simply be the facilitators of the learning by supporting this creative investigation. So some ways that you could encourage adults to do this is provide those open-ended ideas and inspirations that allow for individual solutions. We are living in a Pinterest world. That's where people want to turn to for their ideas. But Pinterest, unfortunately, often has that one solution that people are striving for. If we as educators, as well as the adults that we are talking to in homes, can take a look at an art problem, whether through a theme or a concept or an idea, and encourage the children to investigate it from a personal place, that is going to allow for those creative opportunities to really be delved into. That also leads into that second point here on the slide, which is trying to avoid that predetermined idea of what art products and outcomes should look like. We are all guilty of that. We all have an idea of where we think kids should take a project or an idea. But if we're truly working with children in their own personal creativity, we want to leave it something open-ended and not have that adult precept of what it is that something should look like in the end. We don't have all the answers. We shouldn't be the sage on the stage, and that's what we have to communicate to the adults in the home. So allow children to take that direction and that idea of where they want to take it. A term we're using a lot nowadays is student agency. Another term you might have heard is voice and choice. So how do we allow children to speak through art what it is that they want to say? And then I think the third piece on this slide is really, really important. That's allowing for productive struggle. We don't need to provide all the answers for kids. It is really, really important that kids kind of struggle through some of those problems on their own. We learn from our successes, we learn from our failures. And I think there needs to be a balance in both. If we're constantly coming up with answers for children and helping them through it that way, we're not actually allowing them to think through those. So providing that support and that guidance and really allowing for that productive struggle can be really important. So the first concept that we're going to study out of 6 is asking adults to be facilitators and not managers. One of the longest debates in art education has been this idea of process versus product. And I know everybody has their own philosophical view on what that should be. This next concept of talk about it kind of fits into both. I think you should be doing both, whether you are more process oriented with what you have children do or more product oriented. So we want to ask the adults in homes to spend some time with their children talking about what it is that children are working on. This is a great way for adults to engage with the children and to help facilitate that creativity. And so I would encourage the adults in homes to really spend some time while the child is creating, asking some of these questions. And then, of course, as you would typically do at the end, when you have a final product, talk about what it is that the child made. So we would encourage adults to try to avoid those yes or no answers. By providing only yes or no, you're really not getting into that deep thinking, that reflecting, and then that sharing about what exactly the child went through when they were processing, as well as what they truly think about the work that they are finished with. So I've provided here some guiding questions that you could share with adults to support some of that critical thinking. So some ideas might be, what inspired you as you were creating this piece of work? Was there something that you read, you saw, we did as a family that really inspired this creative art making that you are partaking in? What kinds of problems or mistakes did you have while you were creating? And then how did you go about solving them? Now, I know this can be really hard for some children because they run into that wall of it's too hard, I can't figure it out. So as I said in the previous section, be there as the support. Be there to generate some ideas with the child, but don't give them the ideas about exactly how they should be solving it. But then reflect afterwards as the child was able to work through it. How did you solve it? And would there be other ways you could maybe solve the problem? If you were to repeat this again, what would you change? Or if we took this idea and we as a family worked together on creating a piece of artwork, what might it look differently? What might we do differently? That I think would be some really great questions to ask kids. Some typical ones that we ask are, what's the favorite part of your art? And what's your least favorite part and why? And then what kind of title would you like to give your artwork as well? Because we know what a key thing titles play in creating art and then displaying art. Eventually, we're going to go into the presenting piece of where we're going to encourage families to have a space for displaying work. But that could also be another question, right? Where would you display this piece of artwork and why? So I'm hoping through this brief section here, you got some ideas of how you could present this idea of talking about it with adults in the home in order to best facilitate some of that thinking and that reflecting as well as that responding to questions. Our third component out of 6 is the idea of providing artistic inspiration for creating. We've kind of alluded to some of that in the previous couple in helping kids facilitate some of their ideas and then talking them through. But this is actually looking at artistic inspirations that might be around them. And I once heard a saying that says, in order to make good art, you need to look at good art. And I think some of that still holds true. And so it's important that you find ways, whether it's in your classroom or you're encouraging adults at home, what is it that you can provide children in order to get some of those artistic inspirations? So you want to look at things that are around them. There may be books that are available, whether it's online or through their own personal libraries that they might have. There's a great series by Mike Venezia called Getting to Know, and it's a whole series of different kinds of artists. I want to say there's something around 20 or 25 different artists that Mr. Venezia has explored, and they're all written at very primary elementary levels. So your older elementary kids can read them on their own, or with support, adults can read those to children. But we know there are tons and tons of art books out there that could provide the inspiration that children might need in order to create and to be able to talk about what they are creating. We also know that we can't necessarily go into museums or galleries right now. So we might encourage families to go on those virtual museum tours. We know there are lots of those that are available right now, and most of those are free. Or great way to do it is to go out and look at the public art that's in your community, because that's free. And for most of us, we feel comfortable going outside and being able to social distance and still be able to enjoy art that's around us. I would also encourage you to have adults, as the children are looking at art, to be thinking about and then talking about the work. And you might be familiar with this process if you were a college student back in the 80s when we were studying DBAE art education, discipline-based art education. And this was a process that still has validity today. And it's the idea that when you're looking at artwork, you want to first of all describe what it is that you see. And that's all it is. It's simply describing what you see. You don't put any analysis or interpretation into it, but you take time to look at the art. I think on average, research shows that people spend 17 seconds in front of a piece of artwork when they're in a gallery. And so by slowing down and describing what you see, you already will spend 30 seconds to a minute just doing that. Then the next step is analyzing what it is that they see in the artwork. That can be done through the elements and principles of art. The colors, the shapes, the patterns, the balance, those kinds of things can be discussed. And that kind of gets to the composition and what it is that the artist created. And then the next piece is interpreting the story. So whether that's trying to figure out what the artist's message is saying or interpreting it as the viewer, both have validity, and it allows the viewer to be able to personally connect to the artwork a little bit more. And then finally, the evaluation piece is, thinking about how the child feels about the artwork. And I think the most important is why. Why do you feel that way? And the evaluation is important at the end, because you will have described, analyzed, interpreted, and then after you've done that study, which could take several minutes, you finally make a decision about the piece of artwork. So by providing artistic inspirations for creating, we're helping adults in the home to help children to better understand their own creative output. All right, we are halfway through our list of things, of ways that we can have adults support creativity at home. And the fourth one is providing that space for creation. Now, in an ideal world, in an ideal situation, every child would have a space maybe in their bedroom or another room in the home where all of those materials could be left out at all times. And at those moments of inspiration and making, they could go in and do their output at any time. But we know that not every family has that ideal situation. So we just want to encourage families to look at some questions when it comes to, are they providing a space where children can create? So that very first question is just that. Is there some place in the home, whether it's the dining room table, someplace on the floor, maybe their own bedroom, and even outdoors? Now that we're in summertime and coming this fall, outdoors is a great place to go and to be creating. But is that space being provided? I know messes are a huge concern for families. And so that last question about, can the child create something without making a mess, is really, really key. If the child is worried that they're going to make a mess and get yelled at, that really is not the ideal space for them to be creating. So how do we encourage families to really think about, where is that space that the child can freely create and not worry about that messy piece? And then I think the other piece to this is also, is if messes are created, is the child being required to take care of that? Are they maintaining, organizing, and then cleaning up any of those spaces for creating? So if you're like me, having a space like this spare bedroom that I have where I can lay things out and leave them out works great for me, because I can walk in anytime that I feel the inspiration and create. We just need to be asking families to think about, what is that space, whether it's temporary or permanent, where a child can freely create when that inspiration comes to them. The fifth section we are exploring here is materials, and this message that anything can be art. You know, when we started this remote emergency learning here this spring, my district really took the viewpoint that we have children that range the gamut when it comes to economic ability. We have children who live in poverty, and then we have children, of course, that have greater means when it comes to being able to have materials. So all the units that we wrote for children, all the experiences that we created were really based on the premise of very limited resources. So just like when we think about the space that families can provide children, we also know that materials are varied too. We have some families that can go to the local craft store, art store, and buy anything that children need in order to create. But then we also have lots of families who have very limited resources, and there maybe only be a few things in the home. So I think this message about anything around them can be art is a really important one when you're talking to adults about supporting creativity at home. So some suggestions to think about is, can they provide at least a drawing tool? Anything that makes a mark. Doesn't matter if it's a pencil, a pen, a marker, a crayon, but something that will create a mark. Are there paper surfaces in the home? So this could be drawing paper, notebook paper, copy paper, the back of wrapping paper, cardboard and packaging. And then if we're going outside, the sidewalk, if you have a tool that you can draw on the sidewalk, whether that's chalk or something else, that's an excellent drawing surface as well. And then finally, we all have seen it, but there are objects, of course, in most everybody's home that could be turned into art. And whether they use them to do found object art, the laundry art, using kitchen utensils, creating sculptures with the things that are around them, all those kinds of things have validity when it comes to creativity and children making art. I think the other piece to this too is if the family has a camera, if they have a phone, it's great to be able to take photos and document that work, because many of these pieces are temporary. If you're going to make laundry art, it's not going to sit around in your home for hours, days, weeks. And so it's really important to be able to document that if there is something that's available in order to be able to do that. So this is good both for artworks that are installed in the home, as well as temporary pieces that might be created that need to be taken apart when it's done. So this important message that no matter your economic place, anything that is around you are materials that can be used in order to make art. That's the fifth point out of 6. So our sixth and final area to delve into is this idea of displaying creations. You know, in real estate, the old adage is location, location, location. I think it's the same at home when you're displaying creations. So there's some key questions to have adults maybe think about. Where is a place in the home that's visible for these creations that children create to make? It probably needs to be a place that's visible to the whole family, especially if you're going to show value in children's art. Everybody needs to be able to see it within the family. Is it one that the child values, the location? Is it a place that the family values where that location is? So what kind of space in the home will everybody in the home value? And then what space is free from any potential damage, whether it's by younger siblings or maybe even pets? So you want to make sure that those pieces of artwork stay safe. So I hope you've enjoyed today's exploration of how we can best support creativity at home by working with the adults in the home. These are the citation of the images that I used throughout the presentation. And I've created a handout that has all 6 of these here that I've compiled together. Again, remember, these are from resources that I've collected on this page, as well as from lots of my colleagues within the state of Nebraska, as well as across the United States. My plan will be to go ahead and share this document, whether it's through some kind of a folder or even through the chat as we are sharing today. And then finally, I want to share with you that I was very fortunate to work with the Common Sense organization. If you're not familiar with them, just Google Common Sense organization. You'll be able to see the kind of work that they do. Most of their work is around digital means. But I worked very closely with Melissa Cleaver, who's with Omaha Public Schools, who is the representative for Common Sense for OPS as well as the state of Nebraska. And a few weeks ago, we had a discussion about why art is so important for children, and especially nowadays. So you can see here that that discussion, which is about 25 minutes long, is on their Common Sense YouTube channel at this link that's on here. Again, I will try to share this link out through the chat. That way you have it. But feel free to go in. You're going to hear a lot of the same things that I shared with you here today, but the conversation between me and Melissa will give you some nuance and some ideas to maybe think about things differently. So I hope you've enjoyed today's session today on how to best support creativity at home. We were able to look at how we ask adults to be facilitators and not managers, how to talk about artwork with children, providing those artistic inspirations for creating, making sure children have a space to create, the materials that they need to create, remembering anything can be art. And then finally, how do we display creations? We hope that this resource will help you, especially if we are finding that we need to be remote learning again this fall or some kind of a hybrid. This would be some information that you can share with families that might help them to best help support creating at home. Thanks for joining me today.